Poll out this morning shows Democrats gaining traction in some of the most competitive congressional districts ahead of the midterm. The Cook Political Report conducted the poll in the 36 seats most likely to decide control of the House this November. Specifically, the Battleground poll found this. Democrats hold a 6-point advantage in the generic ballot test. That's large. They're also leading Republicans on every issue polled except border security, and the president's approval rating has dropped to 42%. For more on the poll results, let's bring in senior editor and elections analyst for the Cook Political Report, Dave Wasserman. Also with us, the host of the podcast On Brand with Donnie Deutsch. Donnie Deutsch, who also happens to be an advertising legend and a jack of all trades at that, too. He can, if you've got carburetor problems, call Donnie. He can fix your carburetor. He's great on chainsaw repair. We'll talk about that later. Dave, first I want to go to you. Earlier in the show today, I was talking about how April baseball does not matter for the most part. But you can see trend lines in some cases that suggest maybe it does. I would always say the same about April polls, except for this fact. That I remember when I was running, I had a lot of Republicans saying that I would win in a seat that Republicans hadn't won in since 1873. And they said, look at past elections, look at voter enthusiasm in the swing states, look at President Clinton's low approval ratings in the swing states. All of those usually add up and make the unpredictable fairly predictable. Talk about what you found in this poll as it pertains. I always look to party enthusiasm. Who's the most enthusiastic to vote? Who's leading on most of the issues? And what's the president's approval rating in the opposite party of the party seeking to gain control of the majority?
Well, Joe, we've known for some time that there's a big enthusiasm gap. The NBC poll from March found that 74% of Democrats rated their interest in the election as a 9 or 10 out of 10 and are extremely motivated, compared to 61% of Republicans. We see that in special election after special election. After all, in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, a Trump plus 37 seat, who turned out, well, only about a third of the presidential level electorate, but the Republican only won by 12 points, which was a 25-point swing. What we did in this poll was we narrowed it down to the 36 most competitive congressional districts. And this is a series of districts that had voted for Trump by 2 points on average in 2024. And Democrats are ahead by 6, which suggests a high single-digit swing. What would happen if you superimposed this kind of generic ballot lead on all 435 districts? Well, Democrats would end up somewhere near the share of seats they won in 2018, which is around 234, 235. That would be around a 20-seat gain. And what's most striking from the numbers here, Joe, is the extent to which President Trump now owns the economy and cost of living. We asked voters in this poll, who do you blame most for the current high cost of living, President Biden and Democrats or President Trump and Republicans? And now Trump is leading by 9 on that. But among independent voters, 55% say President Trump compared to 29% Biden. And that contributes to why President Trump's underwater in terms of his approval by 40 points with independents. We've seen particularly pronounced swings among people of color and young voters. So those are the type of congressional districts where we could see some really surprising results in November.
Dave, great to see you this morning. The Trump administration blamed Joe Biden for everything for the first year. It appears that argument has run out of steam with voters now, as Donald Trump's been in office for nearly a year and a half. So let's look specifically at some of the issues. What did you find in this new poll where voters are thinking right now?
Yeah, well, just about the only phrasing that led to a lead for the president was on protecting our border. But in terms of ICE enforcement operations, Democrats hold around a 9-point lead. Obviously on tariffs, which loom large in some of the Midwestern states and districts in particular that are going to decide the Senate, we see Democrats with a double-digit lead. And the war in Iran is almost as unpopular as the health care provisions of the One Big Beautiful Bill. The question here is, how do Democrats narrow down their message? And I think first and foremost, they are going to be running on an umbrella of cost of living issues, and healthcare and gas prices are going to be at the top of the list. And there are 3 campaign promises that President Trump made that Democrats are going to capitalize on. Not touching entitlements, extracting America from foreign conflicts, and ushering in an economic golden age. And that's a triple whammy for Republicans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, Donnie Deutsch, I'd love for you to take on the question of how did Democrats narrow down the message. I mean, I personally would go with costs, corruption, and chaos. And costs, well, that's easy. Look at the gas station, look at the grocery store. Corruption, the most corrupt administration, top to bottom, since the Nixon administration. You look at it's in cabinet agencies, it's in the family. Everybody's making billions or millions. It's crazy. And that actually does cut through with voters, by the way. Costs and corruption cut through. Also, chaos. I know you have a lot of friends, like I have a lot of friends and family members who voted for Donald Trump. I don't know they're going to run out and vote for Democrats anytime soon, but they do say, I am just exhausted every day. He just exhausts me. And so costs, corruption, and chaos. Those are my 3 issues. What do you think Democrats need to talk about?
Joe, I think you nailed it. I would really put the capital C on costs there. I think if you just really look at things and you look at the price of gas, you look at the price of health care, and you say to people, are you better off than you were 2 years ago? And the answer for people, no. That doesn't mean corporations. The answer is not no. Steve Ratnick took us through those charts. But also the income, the disparity of income and the difference. Now, the billionaires are getting richer, the corruption that's happening in the government, your costs at the gas pump. And I'm seeing that exhaustion factor with Trump more than ever. And I also think what's going to really continue to hurt Trump and the Republicans is what's going on with Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly. They are the kind of banner leaders for, like, this president is vulnerable now. He is not in charge. He's losing his grip. That doesn't mean Super MAGA is going to walk away. But a lot of those swing voters hear that and they say, wow, this guy is not invulnerable anymore. And the Iran war is certainly not helping him. So when you put all those 3 C's together, Joe, I think you put it perfectly. I can't do it any better.
Well, I'll tell you what, and corruption also, it's the Epstein files. It's the looting of the government. It's these people getting these no-bid contracts. It's family members making hundreds of millions of dollars. It's the Epstein files. And I would even put in tax cuts, I mean, for billionaires, multinational corporations, and also for tech monopolies. I mean, this system is rigged. So there we have Republicans' weaknesses, and they have a lot more weaknesses than Democrats right now politically. But here's the question. Here's the thing. And all of these polls that always stands out to me, I have no doubt you look at these numbers, a betting person would say that it certainly looks like Democrats are going to win the House and maybe even the Senate. That despite the fact the Democratic brand is in the garbage. I mean, you look, Donald Trump's approval ratings are low. The Republicans in Congress, their approval rating is low. The only thing lower, Democrats' approval ratings in Congress. Look at that. 37% approve, 59% disapprove. Republicans Congress at 41, J.D. Vance at 42, Donald Trump at 42. And you just look nationally at the Democratic brand. It is as low as I have ever seen it. Now, in off-year elections, we've always said you can beat something with nothing, and you can do that. But if the Democrats do, in fact, sweep into the majority, they get a lot to prove to the American people.
Yeah, the Democrats are still suffering a hungover from the culture war, talking about bathrooms, talking about trans athletes, and that still is staining the Democratic Party. And that really is, they've got to walk away from that. The Democratic Party cannot lurch too far left. It's really simple. It's a dangerous thing that's happening. You can't look at what happened in New York City and go, oh, this is the formula in the swing states. It's not. They need to be more moderate. They need to focus on costs. They need to focus on kitchen table issues and stay away from the culture wars. That is still the perception of the brand, that they're not focused on you. Focus on the consumer. Focus on health care. Focus on prices. Do not focus on what's going on with trans athletes.
Yeah, it's such a strange mix where Democratic brand still down, but there's such enthusiasm on that side. So, Dave Wasserman, elections like this often come down to independents. And independents are a little skeptical of both parties, but it's pretty clear that they think Republicans are more out of touch with what they care about. The numbers being 73%, they think 73% think Republicans are more out of touch, 64% say Democrats are out of touch. You can see the numbers. What is the sense here as to, in elections that's close, independents can make the margin of difference. An election that may be not close, independents breaking hard one way could lead to landslides.
That's right. And, what's striking here, 21% of Democrats see their own party as out of touch with the concerns of people like you. So Democrats have some work to do at the individual candidate level, convincing voters that they will bring about change, not just from Republicans and President Trump, but with the leadership of their own party. We're seeing this in primaries, too, where if the perception is that the party in D.C., the Democratic Party, is intervening to try and get the candidate it wants, sometimes that backfires in a state. What happens when Governor Janet Mills in Maine, for example, is airing millions of dollars of ads highlighting first-time candidate Graham Plattner's past indiscretions? Well, Plattner's lead has actually remained or expanded in that primary. And so, the thing about a year like 2026, all kinds of different Democrats across the spectrum, whether they're progressives or whether they are blue dogs or centrists, can win because voters are treating this as a referendum on what they're seeing out of the White House. And the question of where the Democratic Party goes stylistically, ideologically, is one that's going to be resolved in 2 years.
We know election season is heating up when we see Dave Wasserman. Dave, great to have you with us this morning. That new poll, all of it available online. Senior editor, elections analyst for the Cook Political Report, Dave Wasserman. Dave, thanks.